The Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Infrastructure Protection, and Innovation will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the subcommittee in recess at any point. Good morning, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us today for this hearing on strengthening our nation's cybersecurity workforce. A recent report by the cybersecurity firm SonicWall found that ransomware attacks in North America increased 158% between 2019 and 2020. Another report by Comparitech found that cyber attacks against U.S. government organizations affected 71 million Americans and cost over $18 billion in downtime and recovery. The surge in cyber attacks against state and local governments, hospitals, and school districts, coupled with recent headlines about SolarWinds, Colonial Pipeline, and Kaseya, have galvanized new calls to action to better defend the internet ecosystem. I'm encouraged by the momentum, and I'm committed to putting more resources in the hands of state and local governments and improving CISA's awareness of malicious cyber activity through cyber incident reporting. But without a capable cyber workforce, all of our investments in tools and data will be in vain. The number of high-profile cyber incidents over the past year has emphasized just how essential cybersecurity has become. And the truth is, the number of trained cybersecurity professionals has not increased to the levels necessary to meet the demand from industry and government. In fact, recent data show a deficit of over 460,000 trained cybersecurity professionals in the United States relative to its current needs. While the federal government has undertaken several initiatives in recent years to expand and better train our nation's cybersecurity workforce, we must do more. This hearing will give us an opportunity to hear from experts in the field who are working to educate the next generation of cybersecurity workers so we can learn more about the programs that are currently in place and where greater investment is needed. This is no silver bullet. We will need a multi-pronged approach that focuses on training the cybersecurity workforce of the future in schools and universities, reskilling existing workers for the jobs that are currently available, and making sure we have the right training in place to address the desperate cybersecurity challenges in information technology and operational technology. During my 15 years in Congress working on cybersecurity issues, I've heard consistently about the importance of prioritizing K through 12 cyber education to grow and diversify the talent pipeline. Over that time, an entire generation of students have graduated high school and entered higher education or the workforce, and we still are behind where we need to be in including cyber education at the elementary and secondary level. However, CISA's Cybersecurity Education and Training Assistance Program, CTAP, has begun to show meaningful results. I'm glad Congress demonstrated support for CTAP by formally authorizing the program in last year's National Defense Authorization Act, and it is essential that Congress continues to provide it with the resources necessary to carry out its mission. I look forward to hearing today from CTAP grant recipient cyber.org to learn more about their progress in developing curriculums for K through 12 educators and what more can be done to both expand resources to teachers and build awareness of existing programs. Reaching children in the K through 12 environment is an important step in making sure we don't leave talent untapped. Just as important, however, is that we reach students in college, contemplating college or mid-career who may not have considered a career in cybersecurity to be a viable option. That's where bringing cybersecurity workforce programs to overlooked communities and reskilling programs come in. And I look forward to hearing from California State University at San Bernardino on its important work in this space. Finally, As we look for new opportunities to redouble our efforts to grow our nation's cyber talent, I want to be mindful that cybersecurity training is not one size fits all. The recent Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack highlighted the significant impact any incident involving critical infrastructure can have. And while the attack only affected the information technology systems of the pipeline company, the precautionary decision to shut off operational technology systems reflected the vulnerability of our industrial control systems. As we work to address our cyber workforce shortage, we must remain cognizant of the different skills and positions involved in securing industrial control systems and ensure that our training programs fully reflect the broad range of cybersecurity threats we face. Before I close, I want to commend Secretary Mayorkas, for making enhancing the cyber workforce the second of DHS's 60-day cyber sprints. By prioritizing this aggressive approach, Secretary Mayorkas has made meaningful progress in reducing the significant number of cyber vacancies at the department while taking additional steps to address the shortage of cyber professionals nationally. A diverse and skilled workforce has always been a competitive advantage for our nation against our adversaries. But with constantly evolving cyber threats, we must continuously be looking to enhance our cyber education and stay ahead. I look forward to the testimony of our witnesses in the discussion today, so this subcommittee can continue working to enhance our nation's cyber workforce. The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Garbarino, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you very much. This is a great hearing. Thank you for holding this critical conversation regarding our cyber talent pipeline and our shared efforts to develop a robust cyber workforce. And I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here today. I look forward to a constructive dialogue on this important issue. Is it now working?
Mr. Garbarino, I think for some reason we're not hearing you. Try unmuting once again. We still aren't hearing you.
Madam Chair, I could hear him the first time. I heard him.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
It worked? All right, so now it's working. That's okay. Thank you. All right, thank you, Madam Chair, for holding this critical conversation regarding our cyber talent pipeline and our shared efforts to develop a robust cyber workforce. And I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here today. I look forward to a constructive dialogue on this important issue. Everyone in this hearing should understand the multitude of issues contributing to our cyber workforce shortage, which is particularly acute in federal sector. Lack of exposure, uneven education, and issues with federal agency onboarding all contribute to the problem. Fortunately, President Biden's choices for the top 3 cyber professionals in the administration are real professionals, and there is a wealth of private and federal sector experience among them. I'm confident that Jen Easterly, Ann Neuberger, and Chris Inglis will have the experience, the talent, and drive to address the issue, as well as the many others facing our nation in the space. The administration's work has already been seen in CISA's deployment of StopRansomware.gov, the U.S. government's official one-stop location for resources to tackle ransomware more effectively. But their work's not done. CISA has been plagued by hiring delays, elongated onboarding processes, a lack of professional human resources specialists, and duplicative and arbitrarily onerous vetting requirements. It is important that we continue to hold CISA and the department accountable when it comes to these troubling issues, and I appreciate the chairwoman working with me on our oversight of the cyber talent management system rollout. I'm pleased that CISA Director Jen Easterly has said this will be a top priority during her tenure. Our concerns are particularly relevant to today's hearing because no matter how much education we provide to our students, no matter how much interest we cultivate, none of it matters if we can't bring qualified and interested individuals into the government service in a professional and timely manner. Quite simply, we will continue shouting into the wind until we fix these issues. I look forward to exploring all these issues with our witnesses today, and I hope to hear about concrete proposals for oversight and legislation, not just broad stroke ideas, which have been the output of similar hearings in the past and have proven ineffective. I again thank the chairwoman for holding this timely and important hearing today. Thank you.
I thank the ranking member, and members of the committee are reminded that the committees will operate according to the guidelines laid out by the chairman and ranking member in their February 3rd colloquy regarding remote procedures. I'm looking to see whether our chairman or ranking member have joined us today. They're not present yet, so let me move forward and now welcome our panel of witnesses. First, I welcome Mr. Kevin Knowlton, the Director of Academic Outreach for the Cyber Innovation Center at cyber.org. At cyber.org, Mr. Knowlton helps advance cyber.org's K-12 cyber education program with age-appropriate content that aligns with state standards for education. Next is Dr. Tony Colson, who serves as the Executive Director of the Cybersecurity Center at California State University, San Bernardino, and as lead of National Centers of Academic Excellence in Cybersecurity Community. California State University, San Bernardino is designated as a Center of Academic Excellence in Cyber Defense Education by the National Security Agency and the Department of Homeland Security, and it is also a minority-serving institution. Next is Mr. Ralph Lay, the Department Manager for Workforce Development and Training within the National and Homeland Security Directorate at Idaho National Labs. Mr. Lay leads educational programs and research to address cybersecurity issues and workforce development needs. Finally, Max Steyer, the President and CEO of the Partnership for Public Service. In that capacity, he is overseeing the creation and growth of a network connecting more than 1,000 colleges and universities with 80 federal agencies. He is a thought leader on federal workforce issues, and his work is aimed at inspiring a new generation to serve in government. Without objection, the witnesses' full statements will be inserted in the record. I'll now ask each witness to summarize his or her statement for 5 minutes, beginning with Mr. Knowlton.
Good morning, Chairwoman Clark, Ranking Member Garbarino, and distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I am Kevin Knowlton, Director of Cyber.org, an academic initiative of the Cyber Innovation Center, headquartered in Bossier City, Louisiana. As a nonprofit focused on national security and cybersecurity workforce development for the past 14 years, we are supported by federal grants and contracts, one of which is a cybersecurity education training assistance program, as the chairwoman mentioned, or CTAP, a competitive grant administered by CISA. One of the greatest threats to our national security is the lack of K-12 cybersecurity education. Recent cyber attacks have demonstrated our vulnerabilities, which can be partially attributed to the growing shortage of cybersecurity professionals. As a former K-12 administrator, I know the impact K-12 education has on a child's future degree and or career. A cyber literate population will secure our critical infrastructure. Cyber.org's K-12 cyber education program provides teachers with curriculum and professional development that align with individual state and local education standards and promotes cybersecurity technical knowledge and degree and career awareness opportunities for students. Through CTAP, we have reached over 23,000 educators in all 50 states and impacted over 3 million students. We embrace a focus on underserved schools in low socioeconomic regions, as 64% of all new teachers are from Title I schools. And we embrace programming specific to ensuring HBCUs have a talent pipeline and that we are focusing on opportunities for students with disabilities. While we are tremendously proud of the success we've had, however, with nearly 1 million educators and 52 million across the country, our work has just begun. Chair and ranking member, in your home state of New York, 690 educators are accessing the curricula, and my team has trained 301 teachers. Further, in all of the subcommittee member states combined, over 4,400 educators are accessing the curricula, and my team has trained over 3,800 teachers. This is a program that works. As a recent study shows that high schools using cyber.org's curricula sent 4 times more students into cyber-related college or university degree programs such as Cal State San Bernardino. We appreciate that Congress has begun to recognize the importance of cybersecurity education to combat the threats of tomorrow, as CTAP has received bipartisan support. For example, the Cyberspace Solarium Commission called for additional support for CTAP. And as the chairwoman mentioned, the FY21 NDAA formally authorized CTAP within CISA. And in FY21, CTAP received an increase of funding totaling $6 million. This year, we are requesting that CTAP be funded at $10 million, which would enable further scaling of the program to reach more teachers and ultimately benefiting more students. As your committee considers the future of cybersecurity education, cyber.org offers the following recommendations. First, we recommend increased and sustained funding for cybersecurity education and workforce development. It is critical that CISA include funding in its annual budget requests to expand the reach of CTAP in classrooms across the country. Second, CTAP should be formally recognized as the K-12 feeder program for other federal cybersecurity workforce programs. And third, we recommend special attention be given to the what's next after the different academic milestones, whether K-12, higher education, etc., to better connect students directly to cybersecurity jobs. CISA and cyber.org have made tremendous impact in states across the country, but it is time to scale. Stable, continuous funding and legislative support for CTAP will enable the program to reach saturation in all 50 states and grow the talent pipeline. And further investment by Congress to build our national cybersecurity defenses must include K-12 education resources. Cyber.org appreciates the time to testify and are willing to serve as a resource for the development of any future cybersecurity education legislation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan, for your testimony. I now recognize Dr. Colson to summarize his statement for 5 minutes.
Chairwoman Clark, Ranking Member Garbarino, members of the Cyber Infrastructure Protection and Innovation Subcommittee, thanks for having me. I'm Tony Colson from Cal State San Bernardino. We are a Hispanic serving institution located in Southern California. We have, under the leadership of Dr. Tomas Morales, expanded to over 20,000 students and are ranked 7 nationally for social mobility. But one thing we are known for is innovation. Now, you might ask yourself, what does a regional university in California have to do with cybersecurity? And it's actually very simple. As has already been mentioned, we have a cybersecurity workforce shortage. We know we have a crisis. I just looked up the number earlier before we came on. We have over 500,000 person shortage. 500,000. Let that number sink in. This came from cyberseek.org. That's an absurd number. If this was doctors and nurses, there would be a national outcry. Well, the good news is Cal State San Bernardino is committed to solve this workforce problem. And recently, our university established and began to lead the National Centers of Academic Excellence Cybersecurity Community. This community involves 5 federal partners, the NSA, National Security Agency, who runs the program, DHS and CISA, NIST, and the NICE initiative, as well as the FBI and the Department of Energy. Those government partners are now coupled with the CAE community, the Centers of Academic Excellence community that we lead, that has 335 colleges and universities working together to collaborate and solve the workforce shortage. Now, working with these partners and also working with all of these universities, we have a lot of creativity and we have a lot of collaboration, but we also have an interesting vantage point where we see gaps and we see silos and we see duplication, and we're trying to develop solutions. As cyber.org and Kevin, a good friend, just said, look, we know that K through 12 is a huge opportunity, and there's a lot of activity in this space, and there's a lot of investment through a lot of agencies. But there are still gaps. There's a lot of work to be done here, such as we need to increase diversity, but also in rural and homeschool networks. And so the Centers of Academic Excellence community just released a program focusing on rural and homeschool. We just helped get AP cyber onto the national curriculum. We're putting together extracurriculars such as camps and cyber competitions. A matter of fact, the Gen Cyber program at Cal State San Bernardino that we originally partnered with cyber.org, the genesis of that camp at Cal State San Bernardino that's now affected thousands of kids led to a National Girl Scout badge. But it's more than K through 12. The United States is facing a deficit in cyber research. We need to homegrown research skills. So Cal State San Bernardino and its partners in the community just launched the Information Security Research Education Program, a unique program where we take technical directors from the national labs and the National Security Agency and others and work with student teams around the country in a variety of different institutions to solve real-world technical problems. Access is also a problem, access to technology, but also, are we getting the return on investment? Are we producing workforce-ready students? Well, Cal State San Bernardino created the NICE Challenge Project, a national cyber range in use by 500 colleges and universities that provides technology and does workforce readiness assessment. These are a lot of programs, and there's a lot of things. And I will tell you this, the Centers of Academic Excellence community, those 335 schools, colleges, and universities that are working together today are producing over 100,000 diverse quality students, reskilling people, working with veterans, working in our communities. This is all based on one-time funding, and most of it has come from the National Security Agency. What I would like to see is the Department of Homeland Security move forward and support with sustainable funding such an important initiative. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Dr. Colson. I now recognize Mr. Lay to summarize his statement for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Clark, Ranking Member Garbino, and members of the committee. It is an honor and a privilege to be with you today. My name is Ralph Lay. I'm the Department Manager for Workforce Development and Training within the National and Homeland Security Directorate at Idaho National Laboratory. I'm grateful for the opportunity to testify on the issues regarding the nation's cyber talent pipeline and ways to ensure our workforce is ready to meet future threats. As you probably all know, INL's long history with nuclear energy, from its inception to the latest and recent work with small modular nuclear reactors, other energy sources, are one-of-a-kind wireless ranges and the wireless networks that are continuing to expand across the U.S. Various infrastructures and their test beds helping industry. It's easy to understand why we have a deep understanding for industrial control systems in general, and how to protect them. In fact, the Cyberspace Solarium Commission called out INL as the nation's center of excellence for industrial control systems cybersecurity issues. Well-founded. My department takes great pride in having the opportunity and responsibility to lead, influence, and execute a broad portfolio of educational programs and research that address IT and OT cybersecurity issues and workforce development needs. Although INL supports and has its own numerous K through 12 cybersecurity initiatives, and the great work, as you can see already, some of the witnesses that have testified, fantastic work. My primary focus today is to talk about issues relating to the post-secondary education institutes and existing workforce already in business and government agencies. That is an area that needs to be addressed, and very quickly. For over 15 years, DOE and DHS have asked us to provide ICS cybersecurity training courses to private sector businesses, utilities, and government agencies. The desired result was for participants to become aware of the difference between IT and OT networks and systems, how to interact with each other on the job, the IT and OT experts on businesses, and to develop projects within academia and industry to better understand the issues surrounding the cyber education of the nation's workforce. What are the impediments, influences in driving the cyber health, if you will, of organizations? One of our latest projects and documents you may have seen is in collaboration with Idaho State University, La Trobe University, titled Building an Industrial Cybersecurity Workforce Manager's Guide. This is just a first attempt and first product that we've developed to address the job roles required by ICS professionals and how an organization may establish a capable workforce. NIST has recognized the value of our efforts and has asked us to join them in building out their nice framework that focuses on IT cybersecurity and move it into and incorporate segments and areas and issues surrounding the OT or industrial control systems as well. To further flesh out issues that need to be addressed, we've also established our own industrial cybersecurity community of practice, 150 participants from universities, industries, organizations from around the nation and internationally to look at the issues. The recurring issues that are most prominent and that need to be addressed are, as I've listed in the testimony, standardizing curriculum for cyber degrees, establishing a shared repository for cybersecurity curriculum, so that all institutes, large and small, can have access to it. But our main focus here is to, and we recommend the focus of energy to help industry organizations understand what their actual cyber job roles are and the educational needs. We find many don't even understand what their organizations need in cyber job roles, and leading to the education of those individuals, and also how to hire the right individuals. There are many other issues out there that need to be addressed, but those are the two areas that we need to look at. I appreciate the opportunity to testify, and I want to thank you again for your attention to this very important issue of our nation. I look forward to your questions on cybersecurity in the workforce and increasing the flow of the cyber talent pipeline.
I thank you, Mr. Lay, for your testimony. And finally, I recognize Mr. Steyer to summarize his statement for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Clark and Ranking Member Garbarino. It's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to testify before you this morning on such an important issue. Cybersecurity is so vital, and our federal government is central to addressing this issue. My focus, as you indicated in the summary of the Partnership for Public Service, will be on the federal workforce. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization really focused on better government for a stronger democracy. And we've been working on the issue of cyber for some time now. Just to give one stat that helps demonstrate how big the problem is, if you look at the cyber workforce in the federal government right now, under 6% of it is under the age of 30. So to be real clear, it's just extraordinary. There's no generational diversity more broadly. There are 5 reasons for this. The first is that the federal government's brand is damaged. Government shutdowns, hiring freezes, negative rhetoric, political interference in science. All these things have tarnished the brand. Secondly, the opportunities for young people to serve are hidden and scarce. Again, a devastating statistic. Just 4% of new hires are drawn from federal programs employing current students and recent graduates. So government rarely gets talent coming in that is young, bluntly. Number 3, the hiring process is broken and the barriers to entry are many. I could spend all 5 minutes on this, and I'm going to pass unless you want more detail later. 100 days plus to hire people, and the assessment processes are broken. And very importantly, and often overlooked, this is number 4, we're not retaining the talent that we get. So if you look at those full-time employees under the age of 30 who are leaving government, 3/4 of them are leaving within 2 years. So if you do everything right on the front end and you don't address the retention issue, you actually don't solve the problem. And 5th, critically, the diversity is bad across the federal workforce, but it is much, much worse in the cyber arena. Now, cybersecurity has been on the GAO high risk list since 1997. We need to do more than admire this problem. Ranking Member Garbarino, I loved your point. Let's have some concrete things to do. I'm going to give you 10 of them. First and foremost, most important, we need to create higher expectations for the leadership in government. And that includes, bluntly, Congress as well. We need leadership to pay attention and to see it as their responsibility to own getting the right talent into government. And by and large, they don't do that, and it's a big problem. Number 2, we need the leaders in government to actually have a very different level of understanding around technology. And I'm not talking about, obviously, the CIOs and the CTOs. The general program leadership, more broadly, in the world we live in today, has to have a sophistication and fluency in technology that is often missing. They need to be upskilled, or different people need to be brought in. And third, and equally important, we need more sustained leaders. Right now, a Senate-confirmed appointee lasts only 2 years on average. It's impossible, bluntly, to make a difference on these management issues like cyber without a longer-term tenure for leaders. So a very concrete example, Caesar, Secretary Granholm wants to have a career leader in there rather than a political appointee. That is very smart. Number 2, we need to utilize innovative talent models like our Cyber Talent Initiative. Happy to describe that in greater detail. Number 3, we need to promote the government mission. People will come to government if they understand they're serving the American people. NASA does a great job. They have a custom-built career website that includes videos of what they do. We produce a program called the Service to America Medals. We need to be able to highlight the great things people can do if they are in government. Number 4, we've got to improve the recruiting and hiring. To begin with, we had the National Commission on Military, National, and Public Service. They did a fantastic job. Lots of recommendations that are ready for legislation now, and they should be done. We should have exit interviews of those in the cyber field so we understand why we're not holding on the talent that we need. Number 5, we need to get more young people in government. And here, this is basic strategy. Internships, student internships, ought to be the primary entry hiring for government. They're not right now, and they need to be paid internships, or else we're not going to get the diverse talent. Number 6, we need to overhaul the pay system more broadly in government and certainly around cyber. Know that this pay system in government was designed in 1949. It's not sufficiently market sensitive. That's a real problem. 7, we got to invest in the HR workforce, or you won't have these people coming in. We need an enterprise strategy. 8, we need to embrace a culture of that has technology and innovation and collaboration that's central. That's a leadership issue. I mentioned DEI as being critical in this workforce strategy. And 10, coming back around to the leadership side, we need continued oversight from this committee. We need to see this as an annual hearing. We need to see you visiting agencies that are doing well. And we need you looking out for the government brand. Fast as I can talk. Look forward to questions.
I thank all of our witnesses for their testimony here today, and I'll remind the subcommittee that we will each have 5 minutes to question the panel. I now recognize myself for questions. For Mr. Lay, the cyber attacks against the Oldsmar water treatment facility and the Colonial Pipeline earlier this year, coupled with ongoing reports that our adversaries are using cyber tools to target critical infrastructure, have renewed conversations about how to better defend our OT networks. As employers gain a greater understanding of the gaps in their OT cybersecurity workforce, it is clear that employees will need to be reskilled or upskilled for these positions or receive additional trainings through continuing education programs? What steps are necessary to facilitate access to the trainings and certifications required for these positions?
It's a great question, Chairman Clark. The issue lies deeper than the access. There is a lot of access to a lot of academic information, training courses, and so forth. Again, what seems to be surprise most folks is, and we've gone to many different organizations, energy companies, water treatment facilities, to your point, businesses, manufacturing companies, even municipalities. And when we talk to them, they really don't even really know where to start with identifying the education that they need, what topics. I know that sounds very strange, but we've developed methodology. We have task analysis surveys. We use a nice framework to ask questions on what their folks do and where they touch cyber, IT, and OT. Obviously, they need to know that to know where to send their folks and how to educate their workforce and their organizations. And consistently, they don't have an idea. So we've developed a process and a tool set, not just ours, but in conjunction with other businesses that already have some of these solutions out there, that organizations can utilize, even government agencies, to sit down first and start with identifying what are the educational needs of their individuals. You can't fix a vulnerability. You can't fix or mitigate a threat if your folks aren't even aware what they should know and how to know that there's a threat even targeted at them. So
thank you, Mr. Lay. Let me move on because I have a short period of time, but to be continued. Mr. Knowlton, with respect from additional discretionary funding, with support from additional discretionary funding from CISA, cyber.org recently launched a K-12 feeder program with historically Black colleges and universities and minority serving institutions to encourage more minority students to seek cybersecurity degrees. Please elaborate on how this program will work and the goals you have for it. With additional federal support, how would you be able to expand your efforts to reach more students of color?
Great question, Chairwoman Clark. Cyber.org's HBCU feeder program and minority serving institution feeder program is key to diversifying the cybersecurity workforce. Our work is ensuring that high schools who are feeding into HBCU programs have the availability of curriculum, professional development, technology, and resources to stand up a cyber lab or a cyber classroom in order to introduce students to cybersecurity careers. K-12 education, as I mentioned in my testimony, is the formative years for ensuring that students have awareness of what they want to be when they grow up. And if we ensure that our work is placed in Title I schools and rural communities, we will begin diversifying the cyber workforce by partnering with MSIs and HBCUs across the country.
Mr. Steyer, a major challenge for federal agencies has been retaining skilled cybersecurity professionals, yet agencies do not necessarily track the reasons behind their poor retention. What should agencies like DHS and CISA do to better understand why cybersecurity employees choose to leave, and what steps can agencies take to improve retention?
Great. Thank you so much for the question. I will give you at least three. The first is, I mentioned in my testimony that exit interviews would be very helpful in understanding, so long as there was real-time turnaround of that information and it went to leadership. If it's collected and it doesn't go to leadership, it's not going to make a difference. Number two, we already have the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, which is how we create our best places to work rankings. We have data on an annual basis that tells us what's really going on in every organization and government. Leaders should be held accountable for those numbers, and that would make a very big difference. And the third and most important issue is that, again, leaders have to see that this is their job and responsibility, and the most senior leadership in government has to hold the people who work for them accountable to ensure that these numbers are good. If they prioritize it themselves, you will see change.
I think, Mr. Steyer, I think your screen froze, but I'm out of time. We'll circle back. Let me now recognize the ranking member of cybersecurity, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Garbarino, for his questions.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you all the witnesses again for being here today. I want to start with Mr. Steyer. I really do appreciate some of the things you said in your testimony about concrete items that we need to change. You pretty much took my first question away from me, which is good. But I want to build on something, because you specifically mentioned how we should we should get interns, and interns should be able to come right in after they've like college interns, and they can come right in after they've completed their internship. That's what law firms do with kids in law school. That's what bankers do. I mean, it works for the private sector. So I think it would be great at getting young people involved, because right now I think it takes almost possibly getting a job at CISA. A new hire can wait for a year, and a college student coming out of college can't wait a year if they've got debt. So, what exactly? I mean, is there a process there that you're thinking of? What exactly should we do? How do we cut down on the year wait list?
Yeah, so you're 100% right. I mean, and the most obvious example of what needs to happen is our federal government needs to approach talent management as the best private sector organizations do. And the most obvious thing, any professional organization, it starts with its strategy is going to believe, as we do at the Partnership for Public Service, we think our student internship program is our primary mechanism for identifying talent for entry jobs. And that's not happening in the federal government right now. There are some rule changes that Congress could institute. They could make it easier to convert interns into full-time employees. Right now, if you're unpaid or if you're hired by a third party, even one like that gets diverse talent, it's much more difficult to actually convert in. But so that those are real rule changes that would make a difference. But fundamentally, I think the issue is really having leaders inside government, the agency secretaries, the different component heads, as well as the career leaders, understanding it is their responsibility and having clear metrics about what the expectation is. It is not working right now. It's gone the wrong direction. So we see fewer and fewer young people in government today. And it's not because of lack of interest. That's relevant, but that's not the primary issue. So it would be, number one, hold leaders accountable. Number two, make a few rule changes that would make it easier to convert interns into full-time employees. Number three, make sure that there's real budget for this. And that includes making sure that the interns are actually paid. And then the other issue, clearly in cyber in many instances, is security clearances. And one of the things that can be done is ensuring that the security clearance process is completed while interns are students. And there are different agencies that do this better. And so we should be drafting on the approaches that the agencies that are best in class are using for all of government.
I appreciate that. That's great answers. And does any of the other witnesses want to jump on anything additional you think we need to do?
I would just like to interject. Internship is one process, but I think there's a huge opportunity here for apprenticeship.
Yes.
To have people earn while they learn, but also it increases velocity because students are able to gain experience while they're in their job, while they're receiving their education. And it also tightens the partnership with educational institutions to build the workforce you need, as opposed to, well, here's somebody we graduate, I hope it worked out. It's a much more integrative approach. So I would suggest that would be something that be explored, and I'd be glad to talk to you further about this, as we're about to, in the CAE community, pilot a major apprenticeship program in cyber directed at government.
Now your apprenticeship, the apprenticeships would be with the government or with private companies, and the people could transfer into. I mean, how are you doing this? What's the pilot program?
Both. It is both, and because of the interest of time, it's complex to describe. But let me just say, that I think that the apprenticeship model has been incredibly underused, and there's a lot of energy coming out of other parts of the government. And I would like to see that in the area of national security, because it allows us to mentor and produce and validate talent while they're in school and while they're working.
All right, I appreciate it, Mr. Colson. I hope we get a second round of questions because I had a couple more, but I yield back. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Mr. Ranking Member, should time permit, I definitely support that. Let me now recognize that other members for questions they may wish to ask our witnesses in accordance with the guidelines laid out by the chairman and ranking member in their February 3rd colloquy. I will recognize members in order of seniority, alternating between the majority and the minority, and members are also reminded to unmute themselves when recognized for questioning. Having said that, the chair recognizes for 5 minutes the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Langevin, for his questions at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank our witnesses for their testimony today. Very insightful, and I'll also mention, with respect to the ranking member's line of questioning and internships and apprenticeships, I applaud those efforts. That's why I'm also a big fan of the Cyber Core program, whereby students can apply to that program if they're accepted. Tuition is covered for the junior and senior year. They'll be able to they get paid a stipend of about $32,000, and then they go into a cyber job at local, state, and federal government for 2 years after that. Well, let me get to my lines of question. Mr. Lay, I'm very interested in improving cybersecurity training among our operational technology workforce, and the chair, Madam Chairman, had brought up this during her line of question. So as that's where we are simultaneously further behind the curve and where most damage can be done. So our National Cyber Director, Chris Inglis, often talks about cybersecurity education having 3 tiers: the many, the some, and the few. So the many are the people who use technology in their everyday lives, which is to say almost everyone. Mr. Knowlton has done an admirable job describing expanding K-12 education for everyone. The few are the cybersecurity professionals who have cyber as part of their job titles, the kind of folks Dr. Colson's programs churn out. But I want to focus on the some, the people who in the IT world are the software developers or network architects. So these are the people who need a much more nuanced view of cybersecurity than most, but for whom it remains secondary to their main job function. In the OT space, these are the maintainers, the installers, and operators of industrial control systems. So I continue to be concerned that while training for these occupations include an incredible emphasis on safety, on a safety culture, cyber risks have barely penetrated. So, Mr. Lay, in your view, how can we better incorporate cybersecurity into the training for OT professionals who do not focus on cyber?
Thank you, sir. Great question. We have a lot of the information. Obviously, our training courses cover a lot. Unfortunately, expanding that education out to other platforms to offer that, the businesses out there, the organizations, even the local municipalities can't necessarily afford some of the training that they actually need. Some of the training that we offer, working with CISA right now, looking at opportunities to take the curriculum we have, offer it to universities, colleges, other institutes, take the information we have, take the curriculum and let them offer the same curriculum and provide them support so that those businesses out there, the nations out there, don't have to come here. Yeah. They can go locally, and universities and colleges can start developing these offerings themselves. They know the businesses, they know the organizations, they know the specialties they need. A lot of academic institutes come to us and say, we need this specialty. We can develop it and we push it out. That's the area we recommend really needs to be developed. We started to explore that, but
Okay.
that would be where I'd ask.
Thank you. Let me get to another question for Mr. Steyer. In your testimony, you referenced the need to update pay and classification for the federal workforce. This is something that the Cyberspace Salarium Commission, on which I serve, has looked at closely. And Madam Chair, I ask unanimous consent that the Salarium Commission's white paper entitled Growing a Stronger Federal Cyber Workforce be inserted in the record. Mr. Steyer, would you take it from the administration and Congress to get the what would it take? What would it take from the administration and Congress to get the civilian workforce competitive with the private sector? Should the National Cyber Director chair this effort, which will necessarily involve several elements of the interagency?
So, look, I think that it does make sense to have a coordinated response. I will note that one of the things that as legislators you need to pay great attention to is you actually put legislation in 2014 to give authority to DHS on cyber pay. It's just getting rolled out right now in September. That's too long. You can't wait 7 years for this kind of action. So one risk of creating the sort of national or federal-wide effort is that there will be a lot of talk and not a lot of action. So I would be looking to actually be setting up, timetables about when things actually need to get done and clear metrics about what success looks like. But it begins with having an enterprise-wide, government-wide plan about what we need in the way of human capital, and then what do we need to do to get it. And a lot of it may be upskilling existing talent, could be new talent. I see the clock has run, but I would be thinking about it in a strategic way to approach the problem.
Very good. My time has expired. I thank you for the insights that you've offered. And Madam Chair, I yield back.
The chair now recognizes for 5 minutes the gentlewoman from Tennessee, Ms. Harshberger, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for being here. This is, to me, a really exciting topic because we are so deficient in the cybersecurity workforce. And from different meetings I've been in, it would take 1 million people to fill some of the slots that we need. And that, to me, that is unbelievably, that's ridiculous. We need people. And, when I go around my district, I make sure to tell every entity I can, every school system, anybody who will listen, encourage these young people to look at this field. And I guess one of my first questions is for Mr. Steyer. I'm sure you're aware that DHS has yet to finish its development and rollout of the CTMS program. The main goal of this initiative is to cut the time it takes to hire these cybersecurity professionals, and to redefine how the government evaluates their skill set and their pay rates. And I was talking to someone at one of the think tanks, and they're like, they can really ask whatever they want, and we'd take them because there's such a need. The committee's concerned about how long it takes DHS to implement this program, which was authorized back in 2014. What's your perspective on how effective a tool this will be for the department? And I guess my other question is, what recommendations do you have for DHS so we can meet those goals? I'm doing all I can to tell people about a field that I think would be very interesting for even middle schoolers going on up to high school before they ever get in to that arena.
So, Congresswoman, I think it's so important you're doing what you're doing, because your voice really matters to encourage people to either see this as a field for themselves or something that bluntly should be part of whatever else they are doing. I think the direct answer to your question is that we really need more consistent long-term leadership on these issues. You're 100% right. This has been crazy slow in an area where slow is incredibly dangerous. The risk moves so fast that by the time you get to where you think you need to be, you're already behind the curve. And I've heard, folks in government say we work real hard to catch up to the past. That's not where we need to be. And I think fundamentally, the most important structural change that you could make is ensuring that we had consistent leadership on these management technology issues across administrations. So think of it this way: the FBI director has a 10-year term. The Comptroller General at GAO has a 15-year term. The reality is GAO is one of the best run organizations in government because you have a leader who knows that the work that they do around talent will actually pay off for himself. I would suggest that you think about trying to ensure that there is cyber leadership that is consistent over the years. Again, I mentioned this earlier, that Secretary Granholm wants to see the CSER leadership actually be career. I'd be thinking about that at CISA as well. You have a really strong person there right now, but if the average tenure is 2 years, there's no way you're going to actually see significant progress. And people inside are all going to be running towards the new leadership, being very careful about not getting too far over their skis, knowing that someone new is coming in, and that becomes a real problem. So that to me would be my number one suggestion. There are other things I think you can do, but I'll be quiet for now.
Well, you know, it's almost like when you hear these experts talk and they're saying people can even use Google Earth, drill down and look at traffic patterns in certain countries. I'm like, that's unbelievable. Does it take a 4-year degree? How are you going to get these people interested enough to go into this field, because the need is so critical? To me, we would designate this need as critical infrastructure if I could, but we can't do that. If anybody wants to answer, do they need a 4-year degree? What kind of degree do they need to even enter this field?
I would interject. We work a lot with community colleges, but I think there's a mantra here. Career technical education, especially, people have looked at it. Well, that's vocational. That is, welding and things. No, cyber fits there too. Oftentimes, in my work, we have to let kids find out how smart they really are. And that is usually education becomes a gateway drug, if you will. And so if we can identify them, and we have a program where we're looking at aptitude for cyber, not aptitude as in terms of you can and you can't, but where do you fit? And then to identify them and come up with programs that nurture that talent all the way through. We could have kids coming out of high school that could work at the technician level. We have community colleges that are now even doing not only associate's degrees and certificates, but are also including bachelor's degrees. I think academia has a reputation of being glacial, but I would suggest that that is not necessarily a fact in the cyberspace.
Well, Mr. Colson, you're speaking my language, and my time's out, and I thank you, and I yield back, Madam Chair.
The chair now recognizes for 5 minutes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Torres.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 3 years ago, I came across a New York Times article with the following headline: "The Mad Dash to Find a Cybersecurity Workforce." The article, citing Cybersecurity Ventures, claims that by 2021, the cybersecurity workforce would have 3.5 million vacancies. We are in 2021. And so I'm curious to know, has that projection come true? What's the extent of the shortages in the cybersecurity workforce as of 2021? And anyone who has an answer to that question can feel free to weigh in.
Okay, everybody has a prediction on that. That might be a global number, but within the United States right now, best that I could find this morning was actually just over 500,000, and that's in a compressed hiring that we're in right now. But the Solarium Commission report that Representative Langevin worked on says something I think is overall answer to that question, and it is, we've had reports, we've had predictions, we've had things for 20 years. What we need is action on it, because the problem has not been getting better, it's been getting worse.
So in order to, and I'm in favor of action, I just want to understand the precise nature of the problem. So are these vacancies, to what extent are these vacancies coming from the public sector and the private sector? Do we know the breakdown? Do we know the number of vacancies that require a college education?
So I can speak, this is Max Steyer at the partnership. I can speak to the federal government, and the answer is we really don't know what the real need is. And this is my point about the importance of really doing a more thorough human capital plan for the government in cyber and beyond. I think we need it in more than that. And I can't resist also saying that the gap is not simply in the actual technical talent. The gap in some ways is more profound in the fluency around these issues in the leadership more broadly. People who are not actually in jobs that are designated as technical positions fundamentally actually need to understand these issues in order to do their work appropriately. And I think if you're thinking about what the actual gap is, you ought to be examining that one as much as the actual.
Is that another
course?
We need more cybersecurity generalists? Is that?
It's less that I would say, for example, that if you are coming in as the secretary of an agency in the federal government, if you are running a component, if you're a career senior executive running a large program, you have to be thinking about cyber issues and understanding what the implications are for your programmatic choices. And that includes, the needs, talent needs you will need to be able to address those problems. And that's an information gap. You don't need a cyber professional in those positions, but you need people who are fluent and aware.
I have a question for each member of the panel. What's the most successful cyber workforce development initiative that you know of and that should be scaled up?
I'll jump in, Congressman, and mention that CTAP is proven to be a successful program in that we are introducing students to cybersecurity careers and degree opportunities at an early age, elementary and secondary. When a student asks me, what do you want to, or when I ask my students, what do you want to be when you grow up? At that very moment, I am providing them a gateway into the opportunities that exist for them post high school as well as postgraduate. Not every student is going to go to college. And so what we want to ensure is that upon graduating high school, we have students with industry-based certifications that they are skilled to go walk into an organization and be employable immediately. Employability is the key. And we want to see that CTAP be grown so that high school students who are going into any of the 16, 17 critical infrastructures within DHS's structure, that those students have the abilities and the knowledge to.
Can I interject from what is your placement rate?
I'm sorry, sir?
Your placement rate.
So right now we see that high school students who are participating in CTAP's program, 4 times as many students are going into a cyber-based career degree field within a 2-year and or 4-year program.
And how many students have gone through your program?
Over 3 million students have benefited from our program in all 50 states.
Does the rest of the panel have any thoughts on what's the most successful existing cybersecurity workforce initiative?
I'm sorry.
Please go ahead.
I would like to suggest there's a program that's not even funded and even an initiative right now, and it is to match. And what we find in our research is that the students coming out of degree programs, even out of high school, and the hiring entities, organizations, businesses, government entities, there's not a defined mechanism to really place the most talented individuals in the jobs where they can be the most successful. There's nothing based on the old hiring process of resumes and interviews is what's taking place. We continue to hear from businesses, government entities, well, we hired the most we thought was the best person, and it takes us 18 months to 2 years to get them trained up to be useful. Why is that? Because there's not a mechanism. We've identified the mechanism, but there's no funded program to actually implement that, to say, nice KSATs, hiring job applications has the same KSATs. We can see what the students have, what skills they have, and match them to the job. And the people can hire the right people the first time instead of the second and third time. That's an initiative that should be out there.
My time expired, so I'm gonna.
Thank you very much, Mr. Torres. The chair now recognizes for 5 minutes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Clyde.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I appreciate this very important hearing. One of my concerns is the dependence that we have on the H-1B visa program or the student visa program. Oftentimes we see our universities and businesses invest in people that we bring in from overseas, and we teach them cyber, and they take up the opportunities that we have in this country, and they learn all sorts of great things, and then they take their talents and they go back home to their home countries. And so I see that as not being a great return on investment, and we're losing out on the opportunity to develop Americans who can fill those jobs. So I guess my question, and I'd like to start with Dr. Colson. So how can we best encourage the homegrown talent so we don't have to depend on the H-1B talent that at some point is going to go back to their home country, and we're going to lose that opportunity and what has been invested in those people. Now, I understand that those people might actually, bring something to us as well, but still, they're not American citizens. They're not going to stay here. They're going to go home and take that talent and everything they learned with them. So how do we do that? How do we best encourage homegrown talent?
So 2/3 of PhDs in this country are non-domestic, and that is a crisis in itself. And there's a number of programs that I could inform you of after, but in the interest of time. The research program that we just started is really looking at, all right, how do we home grow talent? And it doesn't have to be all from R1 universities. Again, I'll go to my mantra, kids sometimes don't know how smart they are. So the program we created now with 38 universities, working with technical directors on actual problems, is meant to reach into the undergraduate level and start teaching them the science of research so that we can pipeline these and grow our domestic talent, and also develop an affinity for the real challenges that government is doing. In the Centers of Academic Excellence community, I think that's a great example of something we're doing to tackle that one issue, which is very significant for the future of technical leadership in the United States.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. As part of the Department of Homeland Security subcommittee, one of the greatest threats we have is ransomware from the outside. And so I think one of the greatest defenses we have is homegrown talent that can defend against that. So, but does any other of the witnesses, would you like to add anything, Mr. Knowlton or Mr. Lay or Mr. Steyer, to that?
I would also bring back attention to what Tony brought up earlier about apprenticeship programs.
Right.
It's a way to start the folks out in a company and let them learn, and their actual reason, they'll understand why they're learning because they're working for that business. Apprenticeship programs are huge and a key, and we really need to focus on that. Right now, there really is not, in the Department of Labor, Department of Commerce, there's really not a defined apprenticeship for cyber-related skills. There's a reason plumbers and electricians have apprenticeship programs, because you can't get all the hands-on training just sitting in a classroom. Apprenticeships bring that, and they're huge.
Congressman, if I may add,
that's excellent insight. Go ahead, please.
Congressman, if I may add one statement here. Research has shown that a child begins to form what they want to be when they grow up around the middle school level. That is 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And if we look at other countries around the world and see where their dollars are being invested, it is in K-12 education. So in order to begin solving this pipeline issue that we have to focus on ensuring that we have students who are skilled and knowledgeable about the opportunities that exist in cybersecurity.
All right, I like that. Thank you. I appreciate that. And unless anyone else has a comment, then Madam Chair, I yield back. I think that's great information, though.
Thank you, Congressman. The chair now recognizes for 5 minutes the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Rice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to continue talking a little bit about more about community colleges. I think we all agree that they play an incredibly important role in connecting students with an affordable higher education. In my district, Nassau Community College, which is a minority-serving institution, has a cybersecurity certificate program designed for students who intend to go on to pursue a 4-year cybersecurity degree. Dr. Coulson, do existing federal programs adequately support programs like the one I just described at Nassau Community College? And what, if any, additional resources may community colleges, particularly minority-serving institutions, need to assist them in building, growing, and diversifying the cybersecurity workforce programs?
Well, the Centers of Academic Excellence program has over 150 community colleges, and we've set up a national articulation database that was with Moraine Valley Community College, and then some great work with the National Science Foundation's Advanced Technology Education program with Whatcom Community College and Cal State San Bernardino, where working through the community college network to see what is it that employers want, but also how can we diversify talent in so many ways. We have something called the Cyber Education Diversity Initiative, which focuses on minority serving institutions, but also we have programs for the deaf and the hard of hearing, wounded warriors, neurodiverse communities, and so on. I think the community colleges play a pivotal role, and a lot of times it's in the area of traditionally seen as reskilling, but I would say that it's also upskilling. And so I think that community colleges in general are really an economic engine, and especially for opportunity for many people. And the issue that we have in the Centers of Academic Excellence when in terms of funding is everything is one-time funding, one-time grant related through a number of agencies. I'd really like to see Department of Homeland Security invest in this program with sustained funding so that we aren't doing hand to mouth, but we could attack this problem strategically.
That's actually a really good point, and I think that we should take that advice about the funding. I think that's critical. I agree with you. I think there's also a misconception that all cybersecurity jobs require an advanced degree, but cyber.org's website explains in its cyber career profiles that there are a number of good-paying cybersecurity careers that don't necessarily require a degree at all. Mr. Knowlton, we're talking about K through 12, and I know that you have experience working with K through 12 educators. What more can be done to increase awareness of the full range of cybersecurity career options that are available to young people? I think it's really important. I think the federal government needs to support high schools that want to implement career and technical education programs around cybersecurity that are designed to, send students into the workforce right after graduation. But Mr. Knowlton, if you could just, talk a little bit more about how can we increase awareness? I think that, if kids knew what was out there, I forget who, I think you said that, talked about that critical time period of 6th, 7th, 8th grade, where kids are beginning to make kind of career choices. If they're not hearing about it in school and they don't know what the potential is, then they're missing that opportunity.
Congresswoman Rice, I mean, that's a great question. It's a great awareness that we must take. One simple example, Sally has two apples at the house. She has 5 friends coming over. How many apples does Sally need to go out and buy? This is a simple subtraction problem that many of our educators are using. My encouragement to K-12 educators is don't use apples, use gigabytes. Sally has a computer at the house that has 2 gigabytes of memory. She has a really cool program she wants to run that requires 5. How many gigabytes does Sally need to add? By changing the context of what we are teaching inside the classroom, we are able to introduce these students and place seeds of opportunity in our minds of our students. And this very work, this very structure, we allow students to explore career opportunities that they have no idea about. Their mom or dad or guardians had no experience in. This effort and this movement must be scaled. We must ensure that teachers have the confidence, the ability, and the resources from a funding standpoint to be able to teach cybersecurity and to change those apples to gigabytes.
Well, thank you all so much. I think this has been a great discussion. Madam Chair, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. The chair recognizes for 5 minutes the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. LaTurna.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Steyer, let me start with you. There is a seemingly endless supply of cyber workforce-related legislative proposals, but I'm concerned that oftentimes Congress focuses on the shiny new bills instead of conducting the necessary oversight to ensure that prior bills have been properly enacted. Where should the committee be focusing when it comes to oversight over enacted lines of effort?
Thank you for such a wonderful question. And I agree with you that oftentimes we see problems, Congress legislates, and then move on to the next thing. And the reality is, in my view, legislation is the starter's pistol. It's actually not the race. And your oversight function is profoundly important. And so one of the recommendations I made in my testimony was that you actually make this an annual testimony. or rather an annual hearing. And I love the example that was given earlier about the need for long-term money, because there was no way to plan on these programs if you don't have multi-year funding. It's the same here. If you let agencies know that this is not about giving them an authority and then walking away, but rather that you have actually a plan, you intend to be able to have oversight on an annual basis with a set of metrics, performance metrics that you build into your thinking that may change over time. I think that will change the incentives for agencies and the likelihood that you actually see more progress from the investments that you're making. And so I would think about this, again, as you suggest, not as a, legislate and walk on, but rather what are our goals? What is our current thinking about the tools we need right now? How will we know whether or not we've been successful? And then come back to it in a regular way with notice to agencies that this is about to happen. And I think you would see in different outcomes, not easy outcomes, because bluntly, these are tough problems and they're problems that are changing.
I appreciate that. This question is for all of you, and it's a really broad one. With so much focus in recent years about expanding cyber educational opportunities, do we feel like we're at the point where we're starting to close the gap? Are we making a dent?
I'll just say from my perspective, from a lab perspective, from test and control systems and looking at and providing courses to folks worldwide, I think we are making a dent. Some of the issues are very systemic and I think are just not known. Even to panel members, we talk about the tools that connect to high school and we get them excited there. There's lots of progress. I have 23 interns from colleges and universities around my state and other universities around the nation. And I ask them, you're in a degree program, a cyber-related degree program. Why? What are you going to do with it? They don't know. There really is not a mechanism. There are mechanisms out there. We're not connecting them to what jobs they need to go to. So as far as degrees and topics we're teaching, yes, I think we're making a good dent. I think we're offering the right curriculum, and I think it will ever be expanding. It's not going to change, but we got to connect the students that have moved on and are excited, think they know what to do. They get to that next level and where are the tools, where are the things I can go to look to what's next for me? They're not being exposed to those.
I appreciate that. Yeah, Mr. Colson, go ahead.
So 6 years ago, when we started the Centers of Academic Excellence community, we were about 15,000 students. We're now have over 100,000. And a lot of that has to do with this long-term vision, reaching into the K through 12 space, seeing the dividends of programs like cyber.org, the Gen Cyber Camp program, and others that are stimulating interest. And we're starting to see that bubble up. But it is a long haul game. And I think that is a real message here. It, as you said earlier, shiny object funding is not going to solve this problem.
Very good. Mr. Steyer, I saw you have your hand up.
So yes, and I think there are a lot of people working really hard on these issues, and we're making in absolute terms progress. But what I would say is that fundamentally, this is about dealing with problems that are in the real world. And against the problem set that we face, my view is we're losing ground, not gaining it, certainly in the arena that I can see.
Wow, I appreciate your perspective. Go ahead, Mr. Nolan.
Congressman, two quick stats. CTAP's impact is well over 3 million. While that may be an exciting number to many, the denominator there is 52 million. Our work has just begun.
Thank you so much. Madam Chairwoman, my time has expired. I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman. For colleagues who may be interested, I'm going to enter into a second round of questioning. There are a few questions that I have remaining for anyone else on the subcommittee who also may have additional questions. You'll have an opportunity at this time. Dr. Colson, a major part of addressing our cyber workforce shortage must include reskilling workers for cybersecurity jobs. And I think certainly in the midst of this pandemic, when we're hearing about the Great Resignation, there may be an opportunity if we open our eyes wide enough or open the aperture so that we are looking at some of our employees who may not be returning to some of the professions that they were once in. How are universities and community colleges currently working to include non-traditional students already in the workforce or in their programs? And what barriers exist for participation, and what can we do to expand access?
Well, that is excellent. And this is something I am so excited that you asked me, to be quite honest. Reskilling is absolutely necessary. It's absolutely important. And I think the academic community has looked at cyber and said, look, we need all hands on deck. How do we get somebody with an existing degree or maybe had a different life before? How do we see where they fit in cyber, which is such a broad field? We ran a pilot program with the National Science Foundation that provided scholarships for veterans and reskilling workers through the community college program to get them into the cyber workforce. We wanted to see what was making them tick. But more than that, on a broader spectrum, we are seeing programs that are emerging in our centers of academic excellence, and we're incentivizing them not only in online learning, but in other ways that fit around schedules so that somebody could still actually work in their job, but look towards a new career and make accommodations for different age groups and people who are differently abled. There are so many programs there, and I'd love to have a longer discussion on it. But I will say this, we are working in that area because it is so very important. And universities and community colleges are expanding capacity as much as possible, marketing. And actually next month, we're running a national virtual career fair for cybersecurity students and trying to link them with employers, but also try and stimulate interest in reskilling.
Got caught out there for a moment. This is to the panel. What should the federal government's role be in facilitating apprenticeship programs in the private sector? If you've given any consideration to that.
I think Mr. Steyer said earlier is what are the standards for a cybersecurity discipline? And so we actually just started a project with the American Council on Education to try and help set those standards. And we're going to work with the Department of Labor to see if we can get at least the first of what we consider many different disciplines within cyber, because obviously there's critical infrastructure and so on. One of the areas that I think the federal government could really help us in, especially in the Department of Labor, is velocity. To get the apprenticeship programs moving is such a laborious technical process that many of our industry partners have said, I don't understand this, and they're ready to walk away. And I'd really like to, work or maybe put together a subcommittee on how we could fix that problem and increase velocity. Because apprenticeship is very foreign in the United States, but has such key potential to solving this problem.
Very well. And I wanted to do a deeper dive with you, Mr. Steyer, about how agencies can improve retention. We know that, there's great demand for the limited talent that exists. We're constantly hearing of private sector poaching from the public sector. Could you give us a little bit more depth to what we can do in the retention space?
Absolutely. And it begins to have real-time data on what's actually happening and have leaders that are held accountable for that data. Otherwise, there are a lot of things you can do, but you don't know if you're doing the most important things. What we see in the work that we do is, number one, especially young talent, they want to feel like they're being invested in. And I will note that there's a really, in my view, a big difference in the way, by and large, the uniform services are treated versus the civilian services. In the military, by and large, they see their talent as an asset. Oftentimes, the talent inside the federal government, the civilian talent, is treated as if it's a cost. And we need to see, I think, way more investment in the people, in the knowledge that they're getting, in the responsibility that they're getting, and also in the management that they're getting. And if you did that, I'm quite confident that you would see a lot higher retention numbers. If you look at our best places to work rankings, the number one issue for why people are actually leaving is their perceptions of their leadership, from the first line supervisor to the more senior people in the organization. And it's not good. It's 10 plus points below what you would see in the private sector. They're purpose driven. They want to be there. But if you give them bad management, they're not going to stay. And so that, to me, would be the most important thing to do, is improve the management, hold them accountable, provide real investment in their growth and their responsibility. And the government has the best value proposition around. You can make a difference in the world, which most young talent really care a lot about.
Very well, thank you. My time has run out. I now recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Garbarino, for any additional questions he may have.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I do have at least one more question. Mr. Steyer, we'll start with you. The Cyber Corps Scholarship for Service program, run by the National Science Foundation, has been a great program to encourage students to enter public service. I understand that to date, nearly 3,500 students have taken advantage of the program. What more can we do to increase participation in this program? Or maybe not, and if not, it's not increased participation in this program. What's the difference? Is this program better, or could we maybe start some sort of cyber university similar to one of the other like the Naval Academy or the Merchant Marine Academy? The Merchant Marine Academy was started in 1943 because of shortage in merchant marines. We have a shortage in people that need to go into the government cyber workforce. Is this something that we should be looking at, or should we just stick with training them at outside colleges and hope they come to work for us?
Sure. So Congressman, I think this is a fantastic question, and I come back to the military model, and you used it, which is you can think about the academies versus the ROTC. And in my view, it is much more cost effective to make further investment in an ROTC model rather than the bricks and mortars of a new institution. And it's not simply that it's more cost effective, but it's also, in my view, more you'll have higher leverage if you leverage off of the government-wide. We have best-in-class higher education in this country, and if you create more scholarship opportunities for service in government, it'll be a cheaper way of getting great talent, and it'll be integrated against the whole of society. Because you also want to make sure that people who are coming into government represent the entire geographically, racially, gender, all those things. So my counsel would be to further invest in programs that are more like the ROTC than it is to try to create a new entity focused on a specific area like cyber. I think you'll find immediate return because it takes a long time to create an institution, and we don't have that time. And I think you'll have better payoff. I will say that we can undoubtedly do better in the way we use that talent, and the chair's questions around retention should be. Yes, they may.
Programs like the Department of Defense Cybersecurity Scholarship Program that acts like an NFL draft, if you will, where the best talent gets submitted and they can pick and choose. I think